Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. Forbes India and ServiceNow present the COO Collective, Soiree.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Forbes India presents ServiceNow, the COO Collective, Soiree. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan. Well, to set the context, according to Foundry's 2022 data and analytics study, 88% of organizations agree that data collection and analysis have the potential to fundamentally change their business models over the next 3 years. Now, the ability to pivot quickly to address rapidly changing customer or market demands, that's driving the need for real-time data. But poor data quality, siloed data, entrenched processes, and cultural resistance often present roadblocks to using data to speed up decision-making and, more importantly, innovation. So, in this soiree, COOs will deliberate on how businesses can thrive and innovate new business models with the help of data. But before we move further, I'd like to invite Venugopal Arkat, Senior Director, Solutions Consulting at ServiceNow, to give us a welcome note for the evening. Over to you, Venu.
Thank you, Gautam, and warm welcome to each one of the leaders present here. I'm sure whatever you mention here will remain as a benchmark in terms of what thought leadership is all about. As a ServiceNow, as a platform, we see the industry moving in an accelerated pace. And in this acceleration, there are silos, as Gautam mentioned, and sprawls that are created as an evolution of it. How do we make experiences simplified, automation responsible, and organizations agile in this complex world? That's as simple as ServiceNow as a platform, Gautam.
Well, it sounds simple enough, but it's in the execution that these stories come out as to how our leaders have navigated complexity to deliver true innovation to their enterprises and change customer experience for the better from a variety of sectors. So thank you so much, Venu, for giving us that starting salvo. It's now time to start our power session. And let me quickly introduce to you, our viewers, our Power Pack panel for today, starting with Sunil Kumar, Senior Director and Head of Digital Transformation, Operational Excellence and Cultural Transformation at Cipla. Also joining us, Rahul Yenurkar, President and Chief Operating Officer for the Wellspun Group. We also have with us Kiran Thomas, President of Reliance Industries Limited. Mudit Arora, COO, Lupin Digital Health is also with us. And so is Alok Agarwal, CEO, Muthoot Homefin India Limited. And with us is Naveen Sani, Senior Vice President, Bharti AXA Life Insurance. That takes care of the right side of the wheel. Let's go to the left side. We have with us Anish Shah, President and COO, Geo Platforms Limited. Great to have you with us, Anish. And so is Rashida Rupawala, COO, Edelweiss Mutual Fund. And joining us is Arjun Vaidyanathan, COO at KPMG. Sambit Roy, COO, Brinks Inc. India. Neha Jain, Senior Director, Transformation and Operations at PwC India. And Pushkar Gokhale, Business Head, Godrej Security Solutions. And last but definitely not the least, Nupur Chaturvedi, CEO, NPCI Bharat Bill Pay. Let's begin the talk, so to say. We have about an hour's worth of time. So, Venu, let's start with you. You spoke about the breaking down of silos. In a way, the idea is keep it simple, but it's easier than it sounds. So let's have your starting statement on how data can be leveraged to break down various organizational processes and silos into a sort of a single viewpoint for a leader to make actionable decisions.
That's a great question. Data is seen and interpreted in many ways, and there are a lot of technologies that do, because data is in abundance. And as the time progresses and technology advances, and this is going to be incremental in terms of the abundance of data that's available, the churning of the data that can be done, and the decision that can be done. But what we need to do is about the context is very important. For an example, if somebody is saying 4,000, if you add steps to that, there is a context to that. If you add calories to that, there is another context to it. So I think this adding of the context to an outcome and meaning makes that overall decision making important. After all, the work is about executing a decision at the end of the day, making certain decisions that are possible. So work has to flow, not be interpreted by certain frictions, process leakages, and things like that. That's why data and the context and making a workflow towards a decision making is important. And in this, we see in a business workflow, there are different silos of tools that are there. And they would exist for a reason. These are systems of record that you would see probably an ERP or onboarding systems. But at the end of the day, each one of them have to talk and give a better experience. These experiences are, when we are talking to a customer, it's a customer experience. When you're talking internally, it would be an employee experience. But when the technologists say it's a technology experience. But how do we provide a very simplified engagement as one single system for everybody? That is the simplified experience. So in putting two all together, making the workflow easier.
So we move from software as a service to experience as a service for enterprises altogether.
Probably that will define the tomorrow.
All right. Now you spoke of steps and calories. That provides me with a nice segue to go across and get various viewpoints from the healthcare industry and a variety of other industries which have joined us. So Sunil, I'll start with you on this, considering the work that Cipla is doing across that healthcare spectrum from drug discovery, manufacturing, so on and so forth. There are so many processes to look at, and in a sense, data has become ubiquitous, especially during the pandemic. We saw in the healthcare sector a massive amount of sort of data, digital transformation infusion. So from your perspective, in terms of boosting efficiency, while the value of data is there, how do you go about, say, reducing errors, reducing costs? How does data work for you?
So, Gautam, specifically talking about the pharma industry, first of all, your data strategy, it should support your any business problem, starting from a small problem until a complex problem. Talking about, for example, machine efficiency, when you talk about the person at the shop floor. So when you talk about digital transformations or data strategy, he or she doesn't understand that. They will only ask, okay, will it solve my problem? So, for example, today, before digital transformation, what do? You do any machine efficiency improvement specifically, which is largely based on the heuristic or hit and trial approach, or also dependent on the experienced operators. So what it helps is that, once you put up things, and if it is able to help operator to solve his problem, for example, machine setting, right, which is largely contributed one of the area where, it has a lot of impact on the machine efficiency. If you help the operator through digital transformation to lower his number of iterations for machine setting, for example, in a normal environment, it can take 8 to 10 iterations. But with a model-based setting, you can do it in 1 to 2 setting.
But what about reducing the error rates? How do you go about that?
Obviously. So when you set up a new, for example, if you're setting a new batch in the beginning of, after a changeover, then even if you are an experienced operator, it takes time. Sometimes, 8 to 10 iteration is equivalent to 40 to 45 minutes or 1 hour. And it leads to errors. If you go to a data approach, it will help you to reduce those errors as well. I think that way it changes the experience at the shop floor, and for them it is a big thing. Yes, it is changing my life, because I can, whatever I was supposed to do at 45 minutes, now I can do in one go, in less than a minute or two.
So the more just like as it happens with AI, the more the experience happens, the more the error correction happens, and the data quality improves, which then is a virtuous cycle for you to go ahead. All right, that's the healthcare sector perspective. Let me come to the insurers and see what's happening, because during the pandemic, a lot of changes happened for your sector as well. In a sense, necessitated. We saw a lot of implementation of AI and ML, a lot of automation of processes which were necessitated. Now, what that does is it of course takes leaves the bandwidth free for the frontline workforce and for the back-end workforce. The question is, what do you do once that bandwidth is free? Because their jobs are now more strategic in nature, so to say, because it becomes more, how do we wow the customer? How do we make sure that the customer feels, oh, this person knows me better than myself? How does the insurance industry do it, and specifically Bharti AXA?
Great question. So let me just put a little context behind the changes which have been happening. And as I speak of the industry and as I speak of my own organization, all organizations are at a different stage of evolution on digital adoption. Some of them have actually kind of really cracked it, but still getting there. And then even within the organization, the departments would be at a different level of adoption of the technology. Having said that, what we see as a trending, what we see is that there are three places where we actually disproportionate amount of energy, monies, and investment have gone. So first one was enabling the digital sales force, right? Could you enable your sales force to keep the new business coming in during the pandemic, COVID-19? So I think so a lot of thrust and energies and monies went on enabling this. And as we enabled it, it brought 2 or 3 big benefits for us. Number one was that, insurance is a product which actually needs a face-to-face visit. It actually has to be sold. Nobody wants to come and buy it from you. So this required about 5 or 6 meetings, and with the tools which we implemented, which was about video conferencing and the leads, how it was getting to the sales team, qualified leads, which said that this is the product recommendation which you need to tell or to sell. That helped, crashed the lead time and the sales time. So actually the productivity increased because now you had a product recommendation, you knew the profile of a customer, and you could approach and actually close a sale on a video. That kept our new business flow line open. Right. And we moved completely digital. So there was no application form, no checks to collect. You were actually doing money, which was digitally collected. All your KYC was integrated with Aadhaar, the India stack. And hence, the flow was pretty seamless.
But as leadership, are you listening more closely to your employees? Because as I said, the role itself now becomes how to improve customer experience. And since they are at, so to say, the front line of that experience equation, they would have, say, a lot of suggestions. And a lot of the other panels we've discussed how low code, no code, and so on and so forth are becoming new ways for enterprises to truly listen to their employees in the service of better customer experience. So any quick viewpoint on that? Are you listening more closely to your employees now?
Definitely. We are listening to the employees because, so 2 things very positively which I said was, one is that you kind of crashed, you've enabled your sales team to kind of give the right recommendation of the product to a customer, which actually is leading to a customer satisfaction because you're not actually, the level of mis-selling or a product which is a mismatch is actually reduced, apart from the sales conversion which has gone higher because now you're making strong recommendations. Now, as you've enabled your sales team and you've made digital processes, there's a huge impact on the back end. Because now, actually, if you look at it traditionally, the operations world is all about transaction processing. And looking at the compliance, saying that KYC is done, the documents are there, they're not tampered. All of this is now integrated. There is hardly a scope of getting a wrong KYC done. So actually, what's happened is, and if you look at the insurance sector, the maximum number of people are in branch operations. Right? So you have branches which are spread across various geographies, about 300, 500 branches, and you have people sitting there. Now, about 2 or 3 years back, about 80% of the time would be to look at the application and process these. Right? This has changed. Now that this work is about 10 to 15%, right? Because your system is actually looking at the documents or it's coming from the Aadhaar. So there's absolutely no work left. So we retasked them and we retrained them. And today, I think so, the focus is on driving the NPS of the customers who walk in and followed by a very high level of service to sales activity. Saying that, did you give a good service and was it of such a level that you're able to sell him another product, right? And obviously we have put some tools to support them because it's not easy. He's an operations person, he's never done sales. And so you have to give him a 360-degree view of the customer, of how many times he's engaged, what product he has, and based on his lifestyle changes, if he's had some incident which has happened, what is the new product which you could sell? So if he's got a term, can you sell him a savings plan? If he's got a saving plan, can you give him a pure risk plan?
All right.
So basis that, and we have enabled him through scripts, and he earns a lot of money by providing a great service.
All right.
So it's a win-win of things. So just an
a sea change, so to say, which has taken place in the insurance industry. All right. Let me tie up the healthcare aspect before I move on to the other sectors. Mudit, I'll come to you and get the viewpoint from Loop in Digital Health because while customer and market expectations change, the issue can sometimes be that businesses can be left behind. And as Venu mentioned at start, the need for businesses to be agile and nimble-footed. So your thoughts on leveraging data to make an enterprise nimble, so to say. What are your thoughts on this?
So I'll take an example of my previous stint. It is separate from the healthcare, but how we pivoted. So while we were in Grofers, we were doing 90 minutes deliveries and then we pivoted to next deliveries because the data suggested that people are actually okay to wait for longer time, but if the discounts and the price sensitiveness is there, they will actually be okay. And due to this, we were able to open new satellite city and stuff like that. But now we are again seeing the boom in quick commerce because the data again shows, and the Zepto coming of the age clearly shows that people are now okay to pay extra money for 60 to 90 minutes deliveries and even lesser than that. The recent study shows that in the last Valentine week, 12th to 14th day, Zepto and Blinkit actually overpowered Amazon and Flipkart because people wanted instant gratification.
All right.
So this is how data actually helped in movement of other stuff. Coming to the healthcare segment now, since we are actually giving a completely new landscape to the digital therapeutics part. So now we have the data from the patient, data from the doctor, and we can actually sense where the patient is going, if we need any interpretation on our side, how we can help if the interpretation is leading from the diet plan or some exercises or some medical titration is needed. So eventually the final goal is the patient should be healthier, which he is now after the event, and the rate of rehospitalization of the event is reduced. So
in a sense, prevention is better than cure. That's what it's happening. And I believe applications are also happening in terms of data for improving clinical trials and so on and so forth.
All those data actually give the validation to our thought process that once the clinical trial is done or the RW study is done, then we say, okay, we have trialed this on the certain set of patients. Now it is actually working. We can go ahead with this, but to work on the actual ground reality, how it's going and how we can actually bring improvement to the patient's life, because for us it can be one patient, but one family it could be everything, right? So if we can extend the stay in a healthy mindfulness way, it's actually very helpful. And with the data we have in our hand, we can actually see where the trend is going. If trend is going on, let's say on a higher side, I have the trend of my heart rate and trend going higher side, then probably I'll need a medical titration, or I'll need to see a doctor, or I need to increase my exercises or the steps, or the diet plan should be changed. So with the data we can actually have a huge set of changes we can make in the system.
All right, lots of changes. We have painted a rosy picture right now. So I'm going to change the script a bit and cross across the aisle and come to you, Pushkar, because we also see that it's an era of real-time data for anything that we do. But the question is, how do you balance that volume of data which is coming across to you real-time along with the potential risks? So your perspective on how to have this tightrope walk rightly done for our viewers, many of whom are leaders themselves.
Yeah, so very interesting question. See, what happens is today when we talk about the VUCA world, I think one can't really do without data analytics. But yes, with whatever transformation has happened in the past 2 years or whatever acceleration has happened in the digital world, I think there is abundance of data, as you rightly said. And one needs to be very, very selective about this particular data and also, identify whether this data can be translated into information. And when I look at this particular difference between the data and information, I look at three aspects. Number one is in terms of an outside-in perspective, wherein we're talking about, the indicators on the high frequency, or rather the high frequency indicators, like GDP or GNP or what is going to happen, monsoon, employment. So that's one part of it where you definitely need to have a handle on that aspect. The second part is, of course, on the lag indicators, more on the results part, as to sales, revenues, and all those aspects. But I think what is very important in terms of data points, and especially if you want to build a resilient organization, one needs to be very, very selective about the lead indicators, because that is where I think it's going to be important for any organization to do course corrections. So just to give you an example, when we talk about a lag indicator like sales performance or, the top line, bottom line, I think what matters to us, and this is something I think is very, very important, is are we really tracking the lead indicators? Like, for example, in sales parlance, it's about inquiries, it's about leads. What we track is also about how many initiatives you're talking about, what kind of meets you're carrying out, what kind of influencer management programs you're doing. So that's one aspect of it. You get to the back end also, because one is, of course, marketing, sales, that part. But when you talk about building that resilience, I think it is also about the back end. And that's where I think one needs to look at what is the kind of service backup we have, and whether I'm again, capturing data in terms of how I am giving my service levels. So what is the rate at which I am doing my service levels? What is my open calls? What is my pending calls? How fast am I, addressing the service calls? And if I go back further, then we talk about quality. So, there are a lot of data points which needs to be looked at, first pass yield and all those aspects, because I can make out as to what the end result will be if I monitor the first pass yields. I mean, that's example. And I further go back and I now have connected machines. So, it's across the board. So when you talk about connected machines, there are certain data points one needs to manage. In terms of, what is the kind of, whether there is a balance between the machines, whether each machine is actually loaded equally. So if you have, say, multiple lines of production, am I really having a balance between them, and or are some of my critical machines, down for some time or more time? So this is the kind of thing which one needs to look at. So when you talk about this data, it actually runs through. It's a fabric which runs through the entire organization. But my take on this is that one needs to be more cognizant of the lead indicators, because that's where you can, really navigate and really address and build a resilient organization.
All right. And that's an interesting point, considering there are so many moving parts when we look at approaching data. And as you mentioned, lead indicators, that's just one side of the equation. And from a security perspective also, they need a seat at the boardroom because at the end of the day, proper security is an enabler of innovation. But to take forward one of the points that you mentioned, considering this game of constants and variables when it comes to data, how do leaders kind of action on where data-driven decision making is going to make an impact? So maybe that question could be posed to Alok, to you as a CEO. How do you look at this question of data-driven decision making and the impact that it would have in your organization, not just today, but 5 years down the line? What is your thoughts on this?
See, data as we use today, it can be used as much as currently we use our eyes and ears in terms of making an informed decision. So at every major critical step of decision making, as an organization, we are pragmatically data driven. It can be as basic as, suppose we want to plan a budget for a new location opening. When we decide what are the new markets we want to venture for the next financial year or for the current financial year, today, so much data is available. We can do the market sizing. We can do, our industry is, lending industry. So we have a lot of value addition to the repayment culture of a location. As you move from city to city, Cat A, Cat B, Cat C, the patterns of repayments across India are different. So
are you tapping into the payments revolution to get data on, say, the unbanked, so that you can build a credit profile and then sort of, provide those folks with loans, in a sense, opening up new market categories for the lending business?
Even that payment data, also we have a very organized bureau data today available. So, which gives us an overview of a micro market if you want to, as to how the repayment culture is. So basic decisions like everywhere data is used. And we are an industry wherein a customer association with us for at least 15 to 20 years for a housing loan. So, we need a lot of data to ensure, to check how is his repayment going with us. What are the other products I can offer to him while he's with me. The competition is so stiff that every player in the industry is trying to transfer their customer from one to other. How do I proactively retain my customer? If his repayment pattern is good, how can I incentivize him to have stickiness with me for a longer time?
So here, where does the CEO's role fit in? Because as you mentioned, it's a highly competitive space. What does the CEO do to make sure that data-driven decision-making is hitting the right point? Because as Pushkar mentioned, there are lead generation data points that you have to look at. There's a variety of data points, and you have to look at the focus area. Which data am I going to focus on, which is going to create that level of impact and change the organization? As a CEO, what would you say?
So data across segments is used and various data for various functions. Like the data I use for deciding on which markets I need to enter would be a different set of data than the data I would use to plan my product offering to my existing customers or my new to company customers. So the data I use for retaining a customer or to give an additional loan to a customer would be totally different. So we have a very agile data management. I think for which vertical, which segment, what data is to be applied is constantly being monitored. So the data culture runs across the company. It could be in any function, any form. But as I said, it is like your GPS navigation system, which is showing you direction, which way to go, which is the fastest route today. I may have 4 options, but it will tell me which is the fastest, the best way to go. And that is how we are using data across various organizations.
All right, we've so far spanned healthcare, we've spanned technology enablement, finance. Let's come over to the big boys at telecom and see what are they doing. And Anish, I mean, if I start talking about geo platforms, that will be a completely different or a larger panel discussion. But just to focus on the point of, the ROI question when it comes to data analytics and using data in a sense to drive business value. What are the key tenets that you look at to measure whether those data initiatives are working out for you or not? What are those key matrices that you look at?
I would like to first modify your question.
All right.
There cannot be something called ROI. We have to talk about RONI.
Could you expand on what that is?
Yeah, it is result of not investing.
Okay.
Okay, because I don't think, and probably I was listening to all the industry colleagues here, they are only saying how data can do a lot of things. For example, I've seen how transformation can be done. I've seen how new business models can be built. I've seen how people have used that data to even drive operations. So I think it is very clear that in the current context of where we are today, whether it is a smallest business, a Kirana fellow, or a large business, which I think a lot of people are here representing, without data, it's like a soul. Uske bina kuch ho hi nahi sakta. You can't do anything, So I think, to me, and I don't think any businesses or the marketing team or sales team or operations team can survive in the current context without the data. And if we say data is a new oil, then I think we also need to build the new digital refinery to extract that oil.
But would your point not be only applicable to large scale players? As you mentioned, the risk of not investing, that's a luxury which larger players would have.
I think that is not true.
Okay.
The smallest player also need that information. Today, the social marketing or social intelligence, which is required even to run a smallest business. And I think all the big boys who are using data to build their businesses have even helped so many small and medium enterprises and even SMEs and MSMEs to say that without data, they cannot even survive. Forget innovation. If they have to really now expand their business, or even if they have to even be in this current scheme of things, they have to definitely get invested, or they have to invest in some kind of tool, some kind of information system, some kind of analytics, which is required to run their day-to-day operations.
All right.
So I think the questions have to be reframed. We have to really totally never think about saying that what is the return on investment. The question is, if you don't invest, where will you land? I think that is the question we should be asking ourselves.
I'll pose that question to Kiran later on, especially from a cultural perspective. But it's an interesting viewpoint. Don't think of ROI, return on investment, but the risk of not investing. That itself is an important point to look at. Before I follow on the route, maybe Venu, you have a thought on that? The idea of don't focus on ROI when it comes to data enablement, but the risk of not investing into your data assets could drive your enterprise out of its growth path completely.
I would look at in terms of if there is a process, are we looking at the leakages in the process from an end-to-end point of view? These are the wasters, time wasters, and sometimes the process task wasters, the people wasters. You can see each one of them getting leakages. A gas distribution company buying and selling, there's a huge gas loss that's happening that could be quantified. If we are not doing something around it, it's going to be a huge impact on that. But are we investing in terms of having a view to stop that leakage from a technology point of view, looking at it proactively and predict something might go wrong. How do I make things happen? Any of these could impact in terms of the people. We've seen that happening. A leak could impact a huge community. How are you informing the right authorities to make that happen before a loss happens? This has to be proactive and a predictive manner. So definitely not investing something is a huge impact as you continue to stay in the way you are going. We have to find a path that is actually differentiated.
I think
I think we are at the inflection point of looking at it at this point of time.
I think in a sense we've all become plumbers of data. How do you avoid the leak and make sure it's fixed? And that's where I guess ServiceNow also comes to the aid of a lot of its clients. But one interesting word that you mentioned, view. Rashida, let me get your viewpoint on it. The importance of visualization, especially for leaders, the importance of dashboarding, making sure there is a single source of truth for leaders to take the right kind of decisions. And in your role, you have so many functions that report into you. So your thoughts on the importance of dashboarding and visualization of data to create the right impact for the organization and to help leaders take the right decision.
Sure. Thanks. That's a good question. Just want to start by, I absolutely agree with Anish that you can't do without data today. Whether it's in the form of a simple dashboard or whether it's a more complex dashboard, that is step number 2. But yes, I think having simple, understandable, cohesive dashboards that are common across the board at the organization level are critical. We've seen this, especially in the mutual fund space. I advise mutual fund. When we're looking at customer data, for example, look the way customer patterns are in terms of what products they're investing in, what is sort of the demographics of these investors, etc. Having simplified ways of looking at that data has helped a lot in sort of developing new products at our end. So, for example, we've been focusing a lot on target maturity, which is the Bharat Bond program, plus other products in that space. And we've seen that from the data as well, that the younger crew, the new age, I would call them, or sort of maybe my age too, who have been looking at alternatives outside of FDs, right? Who want something simpler to invest in, are looking at target maturity funds. And we've seen that through the data that we've derived for our investors. We've also realized that, it's not just products and reach, it's also the platform that, really banks a lot on this data. For example, 2.5 years ago, to update a nominee, you had to submit 10 forms, right, across mutual fund houses. Today, that doesn't happen anymore because that was the need of the hour, and it showed up from the data at your RTA, where you could see that, this is a big ask from the customer. All fund houses today have built systems wherein you can do all your service needs online, whether it's updating a bank account, updating a nomination, or any other smaller aspect as well. So,
plus you have an account aggregator framework which the RBI is instituting. So that way data comes naturally to you rather than again and again doing KYC for a lot of things.
True.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the ecosystem is also evolving, and that's one of the big pluses of what's happened over the past 4 or 5 years, where in a sense, and this is in a few of my discussion with policy leaders, they've said that they operate like startups. And they see that let's implement this and let's see what happens in the market. How does the market respond? And then we can make corrections accordingly. So in a sense, things have changed. The pace that organizations have to keep up with.
Even regulators these days, I want to make that point that even the regulator these days are asking for tons of data. Their decision making is based on the data they collect from us, and all regulations that are coming out today, which is very frequent now in the mutual fund industry, it's like it's every week possibly, is practically based on the data that we provide.
Absolutely. Whether it's finance or healthcare, you can never get away from regulation. It's a cat and mouse game. All right, let's get in a bird's eye view. Neha, let me come to you for this, because we've been talking a lot about data initiatives, but at the end of the day, it's about aligning data initiatives with business strategy and objectives. So from your perspective, from the PwC perspective, what are the best practices that our viewers can take away from this question of aligning data initiatives with business strategy?
So I think somebody spoke about the GPS analogy, and human minds usually work well with the analogies. So from the perspective that I see, data is really that bridge. So PwC prides itself to be the firm that delivers value through strategy to execution. So the bridge is really data. And it's imperative that, our data strategies or data analytics initiatives, they're all aligned to the business strategy. So I think the first thing is to ensure that the strategy is driving those initiatives and not the other way around. That's the biggest risk, that usually organizations run. So you figure out what your objective is, long-term, short-term, and then figure out, what are the data or KPIs that you want to track, and not the other way around. The other way I would want to also look at this is that being a professional services firm, we deal with two types of data. See, one is the entire client data. So, each of the sectors that we've heard about are our clients. Okay, so that entire piece. And the second is our own internal data, which of course talks about engagement margins, the opportunities, how much money we are making, what about our talent, the entire risk piece around it. We're also, a very highly regulated company, because we also have assurance as a line of service. So I think, so you'll have to see both of these data sets separately.
But how do you avoid the herd mentality, right? For example, in a lot of the industries, the changes happen exponentially. Let's say banks versus fintechs, right? The banks saw the fintechs rapidly progressing, using technology, gaining market share. A lot of the other sectors, the healthcare guys also saw a lot of the, health techs coming and sort of changing the game. So that creates a question on, are we keeping up? Are we kind of left behind in the market?
Absolutely.
How does that affect the strategy side of the equation then?
Absolutely. So I think the way to keep up with that change is, threefolds. One is to really upskill your talent. Okay, and that entire piece around digitally upskilling the talent. And we had a huge initiative around that, where we've made our people our engines. They are the ones who are hearing what people are saying, what clients are asking for, and feeding it back into our systems. That's one. Number two is getting the right automation and the right technologies. So for example, last 4 years, PwC has been on a journey to get the entire customer to cash cycle onto the cloud. So we've had, implementations around Salesforce, around Workday, around Google, so that the entire piece is very seamless. Once the data enters, for example, I go for a meeting and I enter that opportunity into Salesforce. Just look at the power, that data creates, because there's so much collaboration happening on that particular piece, and it kind of ends, when the engagement closes and, the entire EMs, etc. gets generated. So I think getting the right automations and technology. We use visualizations, just like what Rashida was mentioning. I think it's very important to, not only focus on getting the right data, but also the UI and the UX. Because, most of our people are millennials. They just don't even want to do one more click extra. So it's about, getting the target audience right. It's about getting the data right to them. And it's also about the design layer.
All right. Yeah. You've given me a nice segue to come to Kiran, taking the audience, sort of into consideration, who all these data initiatives are being used for, right? One is the customer aspect, but there's the employee aspect as well. And therein comes this cultural transformation. You were a certain business operating in a certain way, suddenly exponential changes come, and now you are a sort of a data-driven organization. The exception is, of course, with Jio, because it was always born in the data world. And taking forward what Anish mentioned, that it's not a question of ROI, it's a question of the risk of not investing. When a company thinks like that, how does it think of cultural transformation that is taking place in its organization, whereby you sort of evangelize to your employees that this is a better way for working. Automation is one of the examples. Earlier, the fear would have been that my job function is going to go away. But now the narrative has changed to, oh, this is an augmentative part of my job. Your thoughts on that, Kiran?
That's a great question. At Jio, we have played a small part in what we call connecting everybody. So what it means is we are now living in a hyper-connected world where what flows through those connections is nothing but data, effectively. So like my colleague mentioned, the risk of not investing is that there are people around you who are making better use of that capability and doing things which are simpler, smarter, maybe more secure, because data has to be secure, and thereby building that trust. And they're doing it at scale and speed. So you asked a question about what a small business can do. Today, a small startup of 5 people can use all the technologies and the connections which are out there coming from the cloud. And they could outcompete you before you know it. And a simple example that I can give is, there's a famous mathematical equation that if you improve 1% every day, in a year you would have improved 4,000%.
Okay.
So the ability is, can you improve that 1% every day? Can you sense what's going on around you and make that small change, small improvement? It's not about big changes or big shifts, but are you continuously doing it, using the information all around you to move your strategy?
But that's what leaders think. What about employees? How do you make sure the employees
So that brings me
think
to my
same?
point, right? Because you can have all the strategies in the world, but there's also a very famous saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So how do you imbibe or infuse this culture into the rest of the organization, right? So one of our young colleagues came up with this very nice acronym, because culture is a very amorphous thing, and how do you make it practical? So like in fitness, Nike came up with this, just do it. So we came up with an acronym called Let's Do It.
Okay.
Like rather than telling somebody else to just do it, why don't we start by doing it? And that's a handy acronym that we have used to say, what do we mean by culture? So let's take that one by one. So L starts with leadership. All of us are leaders. So our organization responds to the charter, the vision, the culture that we set from the top on down. So if you are in that continuous improvement mindset, that then percolates down into the organization. The second is education, E. This is about continuous learning, not just using data to learn, but also using new methods of using data. We are now in the age of ChatGPT, right? Earlier we have spoken a lot about routine automation, important. But there are powerful tools coming around the corner. And are we learning quickly enough to be able to bring them in-house and make the most advantage of it? T is for teamwork, because finally the difference between a large organization and an individual is that multiple people have to work in tandem to do very sophisticated and complex things. That's the strength of an organization. So can we work as teams, or are our organizational structures coming in the way? And are people oriented towards reaching out and creating those bridges which allow team to happen? S for us is service orientation. In everything that we are doing, we have to keep in mind whom we are serving, because finally this data is producing value. And it is not doing data for data's sake. It is doing data to deliver a service to somebody. Maybe it's an external customer, maybe it's a partner, maybe it's an internal team member, but finally we are using data to make a difference. Then finally, let's come to D, which is about, are you using data to make smart decisions? Is that part of how you operate? Is that part of your DNA? Are you still making subjective decisions, or are you encouraging people to look at the data? And it's not about hierarchy, it's not about titles. It's about using the facts of your business to make sound judgments. Then comes O, which is openness. Are you open to change, or are you set in your mindset that I'm going to do things a certain way? Or are you agile enough to use that information that is all around you to fine-tune and course-correct? There's a saying in Jio that, hum to apni bhi nahi mante. We may have said something yesterday, but today we think differently because we know better. So are you able to be that open-minded to even break what you have yourself built with your own hands to be able to move forward? And then finally it comes to the I and the T. I is about innovation. So an innovation has to be encouraged in the organization. Innovation is not by accident. You have to create the rewards and the recognition and the incentive for innovation to happen. So that is the I part of it. And It's a long answer, so I'll come to the T quickly, which is finally about talent. So today it is a fight for talent, and the ChatGPT may be there. People are all afraid that it may take over and replace talent, but I can tell you that finally people make it happen. And if you're not investing in talent to make this happen, you can say whatever you want, but finally all this will never get translated to performance.
All right.
So these are a few things, at least for us, these are the handy things. So you can ask me in the middle of the night and all of us will be able to say what it means for us.
It's a shorthand of leadership that you have, but let's do it. That's the message which is coming out.
Let's do it. That's the final call for action.
In terms of T for talent, I also want to look at T for trust. And Arjun, I want to come to you on this because while we've been, in a sense, evangelizing the wonderful things that data can do, the question is also that where do we sometimes draw the line? Where do we spot the risks of relying on data too much? What are your thoughts on this? How can organizations mitigate those risks and have a robust data framework, so to say?
It's a very serious discussion. So I'm going to start with something little lighter.
Okay.
All of us are very serious.
A little louder as well, if you could.
A little lighter, I'll start. How many of you have seen the movie Mission Impossible, the latest version? Everybody would have seen it, right? In that, there is a scene where Tom Cruise is chasing somebody and he's supposed to be running on a road, but he's actually running on top of a building. Then the guy who's advising him is saying, sorry, I was looking at my laptop upside down. In that context, data can make you look hundreds of places. Relevance of the data is very important. For all of us sitting around the room, or many of us who are car users, going from 0 to 100 in 5.2 seconds or going from 0 to 100 in 6.2 seconds, does it make really a difference? Because in the industry, in what we are using the car for, it actually doesn't make any difference. But that is highlighted as a selling point to you when the car is being purchased by somebody like us. It makes difference in that particular industry where 1 second makes a difference. That is also data. There is a decision taken based on that data. Some use their data, some don't use their data. So the risks in the data are always there. It will inherently be there. It cannot be taken away. Okay. It is the perspective in which you look at the data. I can take my own business. My business changes every week. The data points change every week. My opportunity landscape changes every week. My delivery capability changes every week. My delivery utilization changes every week. If one day is a holiday in a week, my utilization is a very different picture as compared to the previous picture. So we look at the data in that kind of a manner. The risk is there that sometimes it will be up and down, etc. At the end of it, like the gentleman pointed out, it is a judgment.
But then I would say, how do you beat the confirmation bias? Because as humans, we are programmed to spot patterns, right? Whenever we look at data, the question is, sometimes it can be that we think this is what the data is trying to say, whereas that might not be what the data is implying. How do you beat that confirmation?
It's not an individual who decides it. It's a teamwork. He said, let's do it. Last one was, one of the components was team. Collectively, when you're looking at it, somebody will spot the trend. Otherwise, you have yes men around you, then you have a problem. That's a different cultural problem that you're facing. When you look at the data, many people look at it critically. You've got to look at the pluses and the minuses in that manner. And depending upon the problem that you're trying to resolve. Data, why are you looking at data? You're looking at data to say my sales are good, my operations are good, my parameters are good, everything is going up. Or everything is going up, there is a problem somewhere. If everything is going down, there is still a problem somewhere. If something is going up, something is going down, it's like an inverse proportion which is working through. In that, when you're looking at the data with the problem or with the thing that you're trying to achieve, whether it is a target or whether it is operational efficiency, 1%, 0.5% improvement, whatever it is, you're looking at it with something in specific in mind. If that objective is very clear, then the data should speak to you.
All right.
To that extent, the risks are inherently there. You can still look at the iPad upside down and make the wrong call. Like it happens in many times. Today, the data corrects itself. That's a separate problem. But the risks exist. It is a question of how you look at the data. It is a question of what are you looking at the data for. And it is the industry the client or the industry that you're trying to resolve. And this fastness which is, or the turnaround of the data which changes, you have to be agile enough to make it happen. At the end of it, it's a judgment call and you can make mistakes. And
That's
there are
part of being human.
enough examples of mistakes happening with all the data, with all the consultation. You take the wrong call, happens.
You can look at cricket itself as an example, right? You have all the data in the world, but it's what you do on the field.
I will like to end my little speech with another movie quote, Moneyball.
Okay.
The team was nowhere. The coach, it's a real story, by the way. The coach did data analysis.
It's quite a popular story with a lot of the data
analytics part of it. He wins it, but he doesn't consistently win it. It's 2 or 3 times, and then everybody starts learning about it, and everybody starts playing around with it. So it's just a question of time. At the end of it, when he decides to trade the team members, it's a judgment call. He could have gone wrong. That's fine. Things will go wrong. It's how you come out of it that matters. My conclusion is risks exist. It's a perspective. It's a problem that you're trying to solve that will make you fail.
Maybe the compromise is that it's a combination of instinct and innovation.
Absolutely.
All right. In this combination, Samit, let me come to you. While it sounds great, the question is also of ethical considerations. Where do companies draw the line sometimes as to this is not what we will do? What are in your opinion, some of the ethical considerations that organizations should be looking at when they take into account whether they're collecting data, analyzing data? How do they go about it? Because it could be a great selling point as well for a lot of the consumers, right? Where a lot of the companies now are saying, we take utmost care of your data, don't worry about it, which in a sense enables them to say, okay, we'll freely share the data with this enterprise to the extent that we can, rather than guard it all. Your thoughts on this?
Sure. So Gautam, the company I work for, we are a service industry. We are in a service industry. Most of our business is B2B. And the ethical consideration, which, I would agree with Arjun, that, what are you wanting to achieve out of the data that you will take out? Now, I would focus on the source of the data. Whether it is the right source, how much data have you collected depending on the issue or a decision that you want to take, whether it is an unbiased data with least possible manipulation and so on and so forth. And ultimately, what is the outcome or the decision that you will take out of that data? Because let's not forget, in a service industry, it's not only we as a company who presented data to a customer, the customer also has data. So we would like to have the right source, the right outcome of that data that we get after mining, analyzing, so on and so forth, to be able to present a data which is not challenged in a way. Because in service industry, what happens is that you have various parameters in terms of service delivery as per your service level agreements and so on and so forth. And there are reviews where your customer will actually tell you, this is where you've done great, this is where you have to do better. This is something I think you guys really, really need to address. So here your data becomes extremely important. Now that's on the customer side. Now internally, being a service industry, there is a lot of back office activity that we do. So here, I think the data in terms of what will help us to improve our service delivery, improve productivity, improve, responsiveness, and so on and so forth becomes also extremely important. So here, with a large operation, you have various places from where you get data, various data points also to analyze, so to say. So collection of this data, especially when you have multiple systems within the organization, and these multiple systems do not talk to each other, is the biggest challenge at times. But ultimately, every data will help you to take a decision. And I think I will completely agree with Arjun that you have to make a judgment, take a guided decision, and kind of, move on with the data that you've collected, which you think is the right way of collection of data. You've taken all possible measures to make sure that your data is correctly collected.
It's an evolving process. You learn from it.
Absolutely. And there are situations in meetings when people ask, where did you get this data from? It happens. So, okay, I referred to this, I referred to that, so on and so forth. But ultimately, the importance of data in today's time is so important. Whether you take a decision internally to make certain changes or to, roll out a strategy, or you take a decision based on data which is in context to your business, where your customer can or cannot get impacted.
Absolutely. And it's also brought to the fore in some of my conversations with business leaders, the creativity aspect, because we are in a first-party data world versus the third-party data world which used to exist earlier, which means now organizations need to think, in what way can we change consumer habit and incentivize them to interact with us so that the data between the organization and the consumer is shared in an organic way where it's a win-win situation for everyone. I have just the question for you, and it's a point which Neha had raised, and I'll be looking forward to getting your thoughts on that. And the idea here is that we've so far been discussing how sort of while data is all pervasive across industries, whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, whether it's telecom, so on and so forth, we're seeing how it's also changing organizations itself. To that point, I had mentioned about the need for upskilling. And maybe it's something I can get your viewpoint on as to the ways and means that organizations should go about upskilling a lot of their internal talent so that they can then go ahead and, in a sense, transform customer experience on their own. I mean, just looking at your sector, how the entire payments industry has transformed interaction between a customer and an organization, especially which comes to the most difficult part of that interaction, which used to exist earlier, which is payments. Your thoughts on upskilling, how talent can be upskilled so that these employees can transform customer experience. Your thoughts on this?
Gone are the days when the organizations used to see data analytics as a separate department or data scientists as some specialists sitting somewhere in the organization with no connection to the business reality. Let me talk about my own group of companies and what we are doing to make data-driven decision-making as a way of life. So first thought that comes to my mind, and we're doing it very, very religiously, is to identify the training needs and gaps and make all training available to the employees. There are multiple platforms like Udemy. There are multiple trainers that are available, but even YouTube, is able to train the employees for not just data appreciation, but actually data mining. Apart from that, the second thing that we do is ensure that all the tools are available to the employees. So it's good to have data, but unless employees are able to access it, either using any of the visualization tools, be it Zoho's tool or Tableau that we use, so on and so forth, or for some of the more senior and proficient employees, we give them training for Python or SQL so that they're able to generate their own requirements and not be dependent on another team to give them data for any conversation. Once the training and the tool is available, I think it is more about giving them opportunities to collaborate and work on real-world problems so that they can bring the data and the business knowledge together and share with each other how they're leveraging it in their day-to-day conversations. Once they do that, if you are able to inbuild a kind of recognition for them, if you can give them an appreciation or pat in the back when they do something right keeps them motivated to continuously use data and continuously learn. So end of the day, it is about a culture of growth, mindset, culture of learning, and thankfully for us, we are in an organization where employees are really hungry for learning and using data, and we've been able to implement all of these. So long answer to your short question. Apologies for that, but I really feel very passionately about that.
No, that's perfect. But to satiate that hunger, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. So it's good to see that we're talking about how you need to actually show employees the benefits of using data so that they themselves feel that it serves their purpose. Rahul, you've been waiting patiently with us to answer. This entire group has shared. I want to get the conglomerate perspective from you, because Wellspun has its hands in, whether it's textiles, infra, steel, so on and so forth. So your perspective on leveraging data and analytics and understanding customer needs, but also to kind of, sew things up. How do you weave that data fabric across different functions in your organizations? Because as we've been discussing, the need to break data silos, that stuff within one organization. For an organization with so many moving parts, how do you do it?
Good evening, friends. I would like to start my answer with a lighter note like Arjun did. I remember one cartoon by R.K. Lakshman.
Okay.
So the cartoon was showing a lot of pictures of satellite being launched and many other things are some very hi-fi, artificial intelligence, etc. The posters are seen. And there's a common man, R.K. Lakshman's common man standing there. And he's showing at that black telephone, and this is my working model, he says. Other things being there, but he shows that black telephone as my working model. Others are all in the air, So like when we invest in getting the data from the system, a lot of automation, a lot of PLCs are installed, softwares are installed. But if you don't make the use of it, proper use of it, then you have a problem, basically. And you asked me a very pertinent question, how Wellspun view this data at various stages of our operations. I will give an example of my steel vertical, which has been recently started in July, and what we are trying to do there. First is that in the area of statistical quality control, we have installed SCADA system in our machines, which captures the data, and then we take that data into our system. Whereby which we are able to reproduce that incidence or anything happened to the customer side. Suppose we are into ductile iron pipes and we are casting the pipes in a centrifugal machine. We have various parameters like temperature, traverse of the machine, rotation, all that stuff. So this data we captured to evaluate your quality performance, how the metallurgical aspect of the pipe is okay or not, is the tensile property is correct or not. So through the statistical control method, we are able to do through SCADA system, and we have a software called MATLAB, which exactly analyzes and gives us the feedback also from the customer. So this is the one very big use we are making in statistical control area. Second is we are also trying to use this data to evaluate our blast furnace operation where we make the hot metal. Like we have a raw metal burden, 85% of the cost is on the raw metal side. Then we have process, and then we have the final product out of that. So we have a predictive model. What kind of raw material if you use will get the better cost? What kind of process parameter we adjust, whereby we get the proper quality? And cost is being the basic parameter for us to survive in the market as far as the hot metal is concerned. So we have captured all those data, and we are trying to have some basically models, working models, whereby which we arrive at those conclusions. Second is that we also have some very, very expensive item we are utilizing, like for example, magnesium we are using to make the pipe ductile, So the magnesium treatment, how much appropriate magnesium is required to get that quality and the sulfur level, etc. These are the metallurgical aspect, but we are utilizing this data to come back to the system and the process and bring it to the optimum level.
Absolutely. There's lots of, you also have digital twins and a whole lot of other applications of technologies happening
our
as well.
Pipe division is absolutely marvelous to see from the data point of view. Also, our welded pipe division, they take the customer specification and see what is the performance against that and share that data with them. So
Okay.
3 Sigma, 6 Sigma. So this interactive process gives that confidence to the customer that whatever we are doing is as per their specification. Sharing the data transparently and then taking the feedback from the customer. These are the hallmark of a good manufacturing company, I think. So to achieve that business excellence, so we have to have the statistical quality control point of view. Then we have the basically process point of view, how we capture the data, how we utilize that, and the customer feedback, what we have. All these three put together basically makes that integration in Welspun to deliver the best product.
Well, as they say, a happy customer is great for the bottom line. So good to see how across industries, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's healthcare, finance, security solutions, telecom or enablement, we're seeing all these stories coming out of how customers at the end of the day are becoming happier and their wallets are opening up. It's been a great exchange of thoughts and ideas coming from all of you. So Venu, let me come to you for the last word to distill all of the talking points. It's not an easy task, but acting as the filter, I want your thoughts on where do we go from here, because we've come so far, but there's miles to go before we sleep. So in your opinion, in this sort of data-driven world that we are in, what sort of new business models are going to evolve? How is the landscape itself going to change?
Thanks to the amazing insights from all the industry leaders. What you saw today when the world is talking about withdrawal syndromes, India is talking about just growth and extreme positivity. And that's the privilege that we have today. And that comes from industry thought leaders like you, putting the best foot forward. What we heard, some of these business shifts here in this conversation itself, from the pharmaceutical company, from the insurance company, the shift in the model from a service provider to a consumer model. How does the person at the last mile look at, from the operator in the machine to a consumer of an insurance or a person looking at using of certain services? We're looking at human as a service. How can I serve that person better? And this is the shift in the model by itself. We're talking not about investments, but we're talking about how do we prevent the loss itself. This is about not automating redundant process, but automating efficiencies, finding out where those redundancies, eliminating those redundancies, and finding out those possible automation that we can do. That is responsible automation. And looking at the agility part of it and the risk part of it we talked about. While we do and digitize every part of what we see, from customer experience to employee experience, there is always you are leaving behind a digital footprint. And this digital footprint gives us the opportunity to be transparent to our regulators. Risk is embedded into each and everything we do. The correction is already made when the action is happening. And that's the power of digitization today. Everything that comes forth is always digitized. And hence, we are a transparent economy. And that's what you see from here, the confidence that the path they've chosen last 2 years have accelerated the process of digital transformation. The confidence that which we are talking about is the opportunity that we have a digital footprint in place. This is where we say that we are in a strategic inflection point, where we are saying it is not about resilience or risk or IT or OT, or it is about both, and say yes to both. ServiceNow is uniquely positioned in that platform where 25% of our spend in the revenue goes to R&D. In India, we have a team of 5,000 people developing 85 to 90% of the products that the world wants. We are thinking ahead of time. If we want to think about all the leaders put in here, we may be talking to everyone in the world, probably sitting in Davos, some of them, and understanding what the industry leaders are talking, bringing forth into the product and seeing how it is operationalizing before 6 to 1 year ahead. And that's what this digitization provides an opportunity to. Extremely pleased to hear what it is. And I'm sure everyone who heard this would get away with something to think about for future.
Absolutely. That's the power of digital transformation. It allows you as an organization to be the best that you can be. It's been a wonderful exchange of ideas and thoughts from all of our leaders here. And I believe Pushkar has a point of view to add. So before I conclude, I'll give him a space to add his view.
Coming from the security background, I thought that, that's something which is a missing link, because we've been talking about data, abundance of data. But I think what is important as well, and maybe, ServiceNow would have something on that sort, is how do you store data securely? How do you transfer data securely? Because, that's going to be the real challenge. So what kind of protocols you have, in terms of encryption, what kind of protocols you have in terms of transferring the data. So I think this is going to be critical, and I think that's where GDPR, the general data protection regulations are coming in.
That's going to, in a sense, necessitate that conversation.
That's going to be coming in handy, but I think that's something which we need to really be cognizant of. So
Absolutely.
That's
There's
what
a PDP bill on the anvil, so let's see how that changes.
That I think is going to be a critical link, so to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, these have just been
wanted
some
to make
of
a comment, because
you
see people, process, or a technology, and there is a multiplication with only one thing, and that is data.
All right.
That's where, it becomes at most important to look at that perspective.
It's always a people, process, and technology with the plus, but at the end of the day, if you add a multiply into data, the benefits expand exponentially. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful speaking with all of you. Thank you.
Forbes India and ServiceNow present the COO Collective, Soiree. Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.